Hey, Emily.
Hey, Stephanie.
You want to do a podcast?
Absolutely. Welcome to Cycle Chats, a podcast to destigmatize what it means to be a woman. This is episode 9, Love Grows, where we talk to a powerhouse lady. She's a behavioral therapist and a relationship consultant, specializing in the mother-daughter relationship and the owner of Love Grows, Misha. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, always. What made you get into this field and put an emphasis on that relationship?
Yes. So with Love Grows, I focus on just relationships, cultivating healthy relationships. But one of the arms is the mother-daughter relationship. And the way that it began is when I went to college. That's when I really noticed and realized how different the mother-daughter relationship was, different than the one I had with my mom or have with my mom. My mom and I are very close, and the way that she cultivated and nurtured a relationship with both my brother and I was one where we were able to use our voice, and she cultivated and nurtured a safe space that we would learn how to use our voice. And then speaking with my peers, some of them did not have that type of relationship with their mother. It was very authoritarian. Their mother was not in their inner circle of trust. Some of them did not trust their mother just based on the behavior that mom had demonstrated, which as I continued with my training, to understand that, okay, mom has her own emotional wounds that haven't been healed. And then, she had babies and that definitely impacts and influenced the type of relationship she was able to cultivate with her daughter. And so that was really the beginning of planting that seed of wanting to understand more about that dynamic.
I love my mom. I will preface this because she's going to listen to this. But when her and my father were going through their divorce, I was the only kid left in the house. My two older brothers are 8 and 10 years older, so they had moved out already. And I got the brunt of that relationship between her and my dad. Most of the fighting, which they didn't do when we were growing up, or at least I didn't notice. So my life changed really, really drastically. I felt like I lost her a lot through that time. And I remember one day, I was in high school at the time, and I came home and I turned on the TV and Gilmore Girls was on. And I lost myself in that show because I saw this beautiful relationship cultivated between Lorelai and Rory, the two main characters. And I was like, man, I want that. Gilmore Girls became my therapy, my world, my life. And I ended up really seeing my relationship with my mom a bit estranged, like Lorelai, the mother, and her mother, Emily. I was like, I completely and totally related to that struggle because I felt that. I think it's such an interesting and, as you said, integral part of a young woman, of a woman's growth, because they learn from their mom. I think it's so amazing that you were able to therefore say, I want to help those people.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say, Emily, because you preferenced your statement saying that, hey, I want to say that, hey, I love mom. And I think it's important for us to normalize that more than one thing can be true simultaneously. We can love mom, but still have very real emotional wounds that resulted based on her parenting style or her own unhealed emotional wounds. And I think it's also important with the work that I do with my mothers and daughters. One of the things that I always start with is bringing the moms back to the realization that you have been every age that your daughter's going to be. And so it's very important to always go back. Hey, when I was 12, what was my relationship like with my mother at that time? What worked, what didn't work? What nurtured our relationship and what sabotaged our relationship? What did I wish I had? And then that just brings you to an awareness, because nothing's new. Of course, it's different because 13-year-old girls today, what they see based on just because of social media and the access that they have is very different than, I don't know how old you guys are, but very different than when I was 13 and social media did not exist the way that it does now. And I would not want to be an adolescent or teen at this time. I mean, just with beauty standards and body augmentation and filters and like just all of these things. So the youth of today have a lot more than, of course, we did in our parents, but still that need to want to be heard, seen, validated, respected, nurtured, loved, to have a space to cultivate our voices, all of that is the same. And so I think, whenever we're speaking especially with our moms, is having her come back to that space and then have a conversation, start to learn how to create their own language with their daughter, even if they have multiple children, because each of your children are in different spaces. So it's not like I just parent this way. Parenting is a very customized space that is on the job learning, and to understand that your daughter is a part of this. She's not just a recipient. This is an exchange. You both are growing and learning and teaching in real time. What she says matters. What she feels matters. Not to dismiss it. So so even going back to what you were saying, Emily, just with mom, another thing is taking our parents off a pedestal. I don't know if we're really conscious of how we do that. Listen, your mom is simply a woman who had a child, which is you. So I think that, with Love Grows, one of the places that I always like to start with is grace, is understanding the importance of grace on both sides.
Something that Steph and I think we said this maybe with our mom, Steph, when we interviewed them, but the idea that they're only human. So taking them off the pedestal and saying, oh, well, they are first doing this for the first time every day. They haven't lived their life already. They're doing this for the first time. So it really is, it's understanding that they're allowed to make mistakes because they're human.
But it's also important, again, with that thing, many things can be true at the same time, is even though you did the best and doing the best that you can, it still resulted in some emotional wounds for me. And that's real as well. So acknowledging you're doing the best that you can, you're learning in real time and all of that, but also acknowledging that I have an emotional wound that I am now trying to heal from and learn from as well. It doesn't take away the love I have for you. It doesn't take away the respect, but it is real.
I know for myself, my mom and I have always been very close, but it was almost a little bit of a codependent relationship as I started to get older. And then through therapy technique and just speech, we were able to find this ground of communication with one another where I did exactly that. I took her off the pedestal and I started looking at her as a regular human being, which is what we all are. And you start to see, and then I started putting the pieces together. Like how I say, how I was raised this way is why I'm like this. I went, well, yeah, where do you think it came from with your mom? You start to see a different side of things when it comes to that, which kind of leads me into the question, what's the biggest issue? What's the biggest adversity that you come across when you are working on those type of relationships?
So one of the biggest ones, especially working with my adolescent and teenage girls, is that moms, out of fear and out of not wanting their daughters to learn hard lessons, maybe repeat some of the experiences they had, that they start to really tighten this rein and not give her space to just grow and to breathe and to be. And then it's treating their daughters as if they have committed a crime, committed the offense. And that's the way that they parent them. Because what the messaging you're saying to her is, I don't trust you. You cannot be trusted. And what that does for her, how that sabotages your relationship. Because from there, what daughter's going to do, and really it's not even what daughter does, it's what you do, mom. You kick yourself out of the inner circle of trust. So now daughter starts to say, okay, this isn't a trusted source. This isn't somewhere. And so now who fills that space for her by parenting in this way? But really what it does is it doesn't allow the daughter to develop those tools that she needs to be an adult in this world, to be a critical thinker, to make these choices, to use her voice, to understand boundaries. Because that's another thing I see in these relationships that are fractured. Mom doesn't respect daughter's boundaries. And so how does she know how to do that in other spaces?
How do we fix that?
I think one of the things that's very important just in any work with anyone, not just mothers and daughters, is to understand that therapy is not magic. It doesn't change things. Of course, my thing is always going to be therapy is the gold standard, but therapy is like rehab. It's only until an individual is open and realizes that there's an issue, are they going to be receptive? You can have the best rehab facilities in the world, but if the individual does not think that they have a problem, they're going to get into the facility, learn the system, work it so they can get out and do what they really want to do. Even if on the outside you're looking like, man, you've hit bottom, like you've lost your relationships, you've lost your house, you've lost your job. Well, apparently that's not their bottom because they still don't think there's a problem. And so that's the same thing when we're talking about relationships. And it's very important because I do have some adult women who come and they want to begin to repair the relationship they have with their mom, but their mom isn't open to it. And so in that type of space, the focus and the healing is on the individual. individual. You can't make mom do anything that mom's not ready to do, that mom doesn't have the emotional awareness and the emotional maturity to be open to a different perspective. And I think that it's very important for daughters or just anyone to realize that your healing and wellness is not tethered to somebody else. And that's such the beautiful thing about healing is you do not have to remain captive because the other person doesn't want to do therapy, doesn't validate your experience. That's a big thing. You have some moms that don't validate what you're feeling. And so I think that's one of the things that I really convey in Love Grows as well, is understanding that you cannot save, heal, or fix another person. Your mother is included, your children are included, your husband's included. And so now, if we're talking about a mom who is open, who there is even a little bit of, you know what, then that is a beautiful space, because then for me, in my practice, again, it's taking mom back, because a lot of times moms forget you were here at one time. And then oftentimes what comes out of those sessions is mom's able to realize patterns with her mother in the way that her mother parented her. So then, of course, in the work that I do is we want to keep things in perspective in terms of time periods as well. When we're talking about, and especially in the African American community, when we start talking about grandmothers and great-grandmothers, we have to understand the time that this world was in. We're talking Jim Crow, we're talking segregation, we're talking lynchings and murders, and we're talking all of that. So women parented in that time for survival.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, Misha, because I actually wanted to ask this question. Do you find that cultural difference? What is the cultural difference that you see between all of the individuals that come to you? What do you find is, I guess, the same across the board and then a little bit different?
Yeah, culture plays such a big part, culture and religion, because a lot of times that influences people's perspectives, how they parent, the roles of both girls and boys in families and societies and things like that. So those are across the board. But of course, when I'm working with my African American community, that's a big part, is this existence that we have in this country, and that still goes on. I mean, George Floyd, this isn't 60s, 50s, 40s, right? This is present day. You still have parents. The way that you parent is there's a component of it of wanting to keep your children safe and alive.
Because I know you don't just do mother-daughter, that's your specialty, but you do it across the board. So recently I was watching This Is Us. So spoilers to anybody listening that's interested. So there is a Black gentleman on there. I bring that up because in the show, he sees a white female therapist, and then he makes a phone call. He's in the car and he's struggling with what's going on in current, and he makes a phone call and he says to her, I think I need to see someone who's Black, because I just don't think you understand what I'm going through. And it was a really profound moment, because with everything that's happening, Emily and I always like to ask, what can we do with our privilege that we were just born with? And to see this play out, and even my mom was watching, she said, I would have never growing up seen this. This is huge. Because it is. And the fact that that comes to light as well is like, there is a different way that you grow up just based on this one thing. So to have somebody relate, and you go through different thought processes. And as a female, when I walk out, I'm like always aware of my surroundings, and if it's too late, and these are the things as a female I just naturally was raised to believe. And it's magnified to a different level when you're coming from that background. So what do you do when do you work with any men, and what are some issues that you face with men of really any race that you work with?
So, it's very interesting, because a lot of the men who come to Love Grows, of course, are in the couple space that their significant other has brought them. And one of the things that I realized quite early in my practice, just because, okay, so let's speak about it. So the way that men are usually oftentimes socialized, especially Black men, is that the vulnerability piece is out of there, right? It is strong, and we've heard this analogy shared, I'm sure you have, is that toddlers, a little girl and a little boy, fall down the stairs. What do? We pick up the little girl, we nurture her, we allow her to have her full gamut of emotions. We hold her, we nurture her, she's okay, we baby her per se. A little boy, what do? Suck it up, nothing's wrong with you, big boys don't cry, get it, shake it off, you're not whatever. And you're like, no, he's 2, he has a concussion. Boys learn very young that the only emotions that I can express without my sexuality and manhood being questioned is happiness and anger. But boys and men are human, and so they have access to the entire spectrum of emotions like girls. Like even in our play, we play with dolls and we have this entire world that we create just by ourselves and dialogue and things like that. And that's why women, we can come together over a glass of wine or tea or at the park or whatever, and we can have conversations for hours. We don't need to do stuff. Usually when men talk, you'll see that it's around an activity. They play a sport afterwards. Hey, we're kind of sitting chilling. We may talk about it. We're working on the car. We're having conversations. Men usually, when they are having vulnerable conversations, are around an activity. We're smoking cigars. It's around an activity. We're not just sitting looking at each other like the three of us are right now. So going back to your This Is Us example is of being a Black woman, understanding how, of course, in my community, how a lot of little Black boys are socialized by both men and women.
It's like when you're raised a certain way. I was raised like very old school Italian. And so it was like, boys don't cry. You're the little girl. You're going to grow up. You're going to marry a doctor and he's going to take care of you. You're going to cook, clean, have babies. I also was born a little bit of a feminist. So as I was growing up, I was like, well, I want to wear black nail polish and I want to cut my hair short. And I'm going to do all of these things that my culture is telling me not to do, and I think sometimes you find, and this is just a human being thing, where you find people who feel like they don't really fit into something, and to find those that we connect with on that level that understand, look, this is part of the core of how I was brought up, what I was born into. I can't change that, but I want to change these feelings I'm having surrounding that.
Absolutely. Well done, Stephanie. Well said.
You're so well spoken and so enlightening. And this is just like, I feel like it's just the nourishment that my brain needed today. I really appreciate everything that you're saying, because I think the world needs to hear that. And I think more people need to understand the wording that you're giving.
I always come back to critical thinking. And I think that's one of the best gifts that you can give your child, is by creating a space that they start to question everything. Like, even so, I'm a former professor of psychology. And one of the things that it was very important with my students, so this was at the collegiate level as well. And so one of the things that whenever I taught, it was very important. I started like saying, listen, we're going to study different psychologists that have their own theories. And just because someone has the degrees and books and theories does not mean that it's applicable to your life. Like, just the way that they have theories, you have your own theories for your life. And let's start creating those, and you test them. Are they true or not?
Everything you're saying is beautiful. And like Stephanie said, food for thought. I need to ask you, because I'm sure your answer is beautiful and eloquent and just strong. So what does women empowerment mean to you?
For me, women empowerment is for women to have the freedom to define themselves, whatever that may be, because it looks different for each woman. How does she define womanhood for her? I know Stephanie mentioned, hey, I grew up in this traditional family, but then I also evolved to be a feminist woman. And I think a lot of times, a lot of things are lost in translation because we speak the same language. So it's not until I would have a conversation with Stephanie, so how do you operationally define feminism for you? There's the Webster definition, but how do you operationally define that for your life? That gives me more insight, because another woman may define it differently. And the way that she defines it for myself may be like, I'll rock with that. It's very anti-man, and I am one of the unification that we need each other, men and women. One's not higher than the other. We work in collaboration. We work well like this. There's not a hierarchy for men and women for me. But for me, empowerment is that you can define yourself. You can define your life, because I think that when you have the freedom to do that, it allows you to show up and expand and evolve and reach to these places without having this limiting narration around you. So even if someone were to say, woman empowerment is XYZ, but if I don't identify with those things or they don't resonate with me, then is it like, okay, well, I guess I'm not about woman empowerment. So for me, that's what it is, the ability to define and to understand that even that definition is constantly evolving. There's nothing static in this world. So the way that I may define woman empowerment today in a panorama is that it may look very different. And I'm sure it's very different than the way I would have defined it at 18. Because the more life experiences that we have, our definitions evolve as well. And they should. You know, that lets us know that we're growing. We should not still have the same thoughts that we had at 18. But there's a lot of people we meet that have that. And I think that's a reflection of what we spoke about earlier. I'm just taking in a certain amount of information. I'm in a petri dish of everyone who has the same thoughts that I have. So there's no new information coming in. So it's just we're breeding this same thing. And I think that when you start to have conversations with people who look different than you, who have different perspectives, and, you know, they check all the boxes of different culture, religion, whatever the case is. So, for example, I'm a Fulbright Scholar. And one of the beauty things of being a Fulbright is I've had the opportunity to interface with so many different people around the world. And I was an ambassador for Fulbright for a while. And so having that and having conversations with people who may be from countries that I didn't even know where they were before I met them, and I had to go to a map. When you start to have conversations, and whereas I may have thought like, oh, this is just a black, white American thing, right? But you speak to someone from another country and it's like, we have those exact same issues, and both of the people may look white, have white skin or black skin, but what you're speaking about, we still have that conflict within because it's culture or class or education, whatever it may be. And that's the importance of getting out of that petri dish, having conversations, and being able to say that, okay, this isn't unique. Now, of course, there are some things that are very unique to a people, and that's to be respected and honored as well. But once we start having these conversations, again, that expansion, you know, even the conversations I love, when I speak to individuals from other parts, one of the questions I'm going to talk about is dating. What does dating look like in your culture? What does that look like? What love and relationships? I love Elizabeth Gilbert, who, of course, wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And she wrote another book called Committed. And so from there, she was just interviewing women from across the world in different cultures about love and relationships and how they partnered. And in that story, she was speaking to a woman from a traditional community, maybe rainforest, Amazon, I can't remember the particular culture. And she was speaking to the woman like, well, how did you choose your husband? How did you know you loved him and wanted to marry him? And the woman was like, love. Like, he could climb the tree the fastest and could provide the most. So I say that to say that a lot of times we project our realities and our understanding onto other people and feel like, okay, well, Stephanie partnered with this individual, and so everybody partners for love, or everybody partners for this, and so that must be it. But realizing that just something as simple as partnership, that people partner for many different reasons, and sometimes love may not be it. They may grow into love, but there's some real other variables as to why people partner. And I just use that as a simple example of the importance of cultivating and nurturing just one-on-one. And it takes more time, and it's not quick, fast. It doesn't happen overnight. And it's one of the things that I like to bring up to people. Like, think about the person who's like your best bud. It didn't happen like, hey, Emily, you and I met today. You're my best friend, and fast track. Tell me all your secrets. Tell me everything like this. Like no, our friendships organically evolve over time. There's no pressure. There's no expectation. Well, Emily, if you're going to be my friend, you cannot do X, Y, Z. You must do A, B, C. Now, of course, we have things that allow people more access to us as trust is established, right? We don't meet people and just kind of give our deep, most vulnerable things. Like, trust is earned. But it's the organic way to grow relationships. And by having these kind of conversations with people, we see how similar we are. And there's a lot more places that we are, just at the human level, than a lot of the things that perpetuated to keep us separated. And I always question, like, who benefits when we're separated?
That's something that Steph and I say a lot. We are all so different, but the similarities are so entwined, and we have to celebrate all of our differences while celebrating our similarities as well.
Yeah, we put such an intense focus on the differences that people forget that there are similarities that exist. And when the two come together, that's when the balance happens.
Absolutely. And again, getting rid of the dichotomy, it's not just like, okay, well, for me to fully love and embrace my Blackness and who I am, that makes me anti-white. Like, again, it's not a dichotomy. Like, multiple things can exist. Self-love and love of my people and culture and where I come from does not depend on hatred of someone else. They're mutually exclusive. They do not, this exists on its own. It's not tethered to anything else.
Love across the board, you're not hurting anyone when you love. So whether somebody chooses to celebrate those things about themselves, let them.
And when we're talking about health and wellness, everyone wins. And that's the beauty of societies and cultures that realize that when we make it equitable across the board, access to education, just all of the things that we consider basic human needs, clean water, safe shelter, safe environment, access to resources, all of that. When your society and population is healthy on multiple levels, well protected, society changes. And wanting the wellness of all, the wellness of one, the wellness of all benefits everybody. Society operates better. Tangent number 583.
we get on them all the time. Everything you're saying is right and truthful. And if the world can change, and it can change with starting with one person, it doesn't have to be a huge movement. You know, our podcast is still very small. And even though we intend to change lives, that's our goal. So the change starts with us.
And you know, and the thing about it, Emily, I love that you mentioned that. I think, again, when we're talking about the double-edged sword of social media, that again, it is very number-like driven. You know, if you don't have X amount of followers or engagement, you don't qualify for this. And I get it, you brands or whatever, fine. I get it. From a business perspective, more bang for your buck is what they want, right? But when we're talking about at the human level, that is so detrimental when it starts to be moved by numbers. Because again, numbers, when you're like, oh, I have all of this, but what is the engagement? Who are they? What impact are you making? The driver is, I'm creating this content, this space, because it aligns at the heart level, the heart space, and it aligns with who we are as individuals, as humans, as women. And that's why you do what you do. And when you come from a space like that, it's not work.
Stephanie and I are like the luckiest. We get off the calls and we're like, how did we get to be so lucky? We're changed by all of you. Stephanie and I were actors, as I said before. And one of the things that I always took from all of the different characters I played was my favorite quality that they had, their confidence, whatever it was. And I would try and impart that to myself, their wisdom that they gave me. So I do the same thing with all of you ladies. I listen to you and I gain your knowledge, and then I try and impart that wisdom into my life. We have both grown so much from our small amount of time doing this. I can see the effects that it has on my relationship with my husband. I can see the effect that it's having on the relationship with myself. It's huge. I get to take that away. How beautiful is that, right? What else could you want from life?
And I love that because, you know, by that, just you ladies show up differently in your world as well. Like you said, hey, my husband, the relationship with myself. And I am so glad you said that, because that is so important when we realize that we are co-creating and co-nurturing the relationships in our lives. It's not your partner. Like, it is both of us. And even when you look at individuals, you've had partnerships before your marriage, right? And you look at the relationships. Hey, I was in each of those relationships, but I'm sure they were different, because the coming together of different people, it's this alchemy. It creates something unique in this space. And the beauty of it, because of course, you know it from your vantage point, is just what you said, Emily. I have this experience. I reflect on it, the wisdom, I grow from it. And so now, what was the ceiling, this now becomes my floor. And I build from here. So I am a different person that is showing up. And so now when we're looking at people from our past, the version of Emily that your husband has, no other partner before him has that Emily, right? Because that Emily didn't exist before. right? She is this culmination of her life experiences and wisdom and the way that, like you said, you take it in, you grow, you evolve. And so that's beautiful to know as well that, listen, I'm not the same Misha that you knew X amount of years ago because of that evolution, of that work. There are some people who are the same that you knew because they haven't done their work. So they are in that same space, even though life continues and evolves and stuff like that. But when we're talking about growing, it is you are an active participant. It doesn't happen to you. It happens through you, with you.
So you were just talking about growth, right? That's this whole big thing, and that's your business. Love grows. So what advice would you give your 15-year-old self looking back?
Oh my goodness. The advice that I would give 15-year-old Misha is the power in authenticity, is settling in to who you are, to really be focused inward in who you are, but then also having the ability to see outward as well. Like, who am I as I'm interfacing in these spaces? So I think 15-year-old Misha, I would really focus on how do you feel, bringing awareness to who she is, because I think that is such a core, powerful tool that we can have just as humans is awareness. How do I feel when I'm in this space? Really to be able to check in with myself. Do I feel safe here? Do I feel comfortable here? Do I feel censored? I would really focus on 15-year-old Misha, on her awareness, because that is a tool that carries us through life. Being aware of how do I feel in this space. I think it also becomes a protective measure, especially when we're talking about dating and friendships. And I remember working with adolescents and teenage girls, and the type of behavior and experiences that they were having at the hands of their friends was so abusive and so unkind. And I had to work with, we're going to have to redefine for you what friendship is. Because the way that these girls are behaving and treating you, that's not friendship. So that awareness of herself to know that I don't feel good interacting with these girls when I'm in their presence. And with that is bringing my awareness to, okay, what is this? Let me look around. Why do I feel this way? And so that would be the advice I would give 15-year-old and even younger, is the awareness component, and to be able to be your source of check-in, not to depend on the external world to tell you how you feel, to tell you that comes from within. And then once you have this feeling, then of course you can start to question it and explore it. Okay, what is it? What is really operating here? So it would be the awareness.
This has been an absolute pleasure and an honor. And you have taught us, like I said, Emily and I are going to probably have a full-blown conversation after this. And I want other people to be able to discover the beauty and the knowledge that you just embody. So where can our listeners find you? And do you have any special projects coming up?
So it's easy. Just on Instagram would be great. It's Love Grows with an S at the end, S as in Sunny, _ Misha, M-I, S as in Sam, H, A as in Apple. And then from there, there's a link that would take you to the website and all the other pages and things like that. What I am working on, and I'm super excited about, I don't have a date yet, is starting my podcast again. And so many moons ago, I had a podcast called Golden Hues. It was on another platform. And what it was about was just relationships, just all relationships. And I would chat with people across the spectrum and in all sorts of different fields, and just talk about life, love, and relationships, the relationship you have with yourself and the relationship with the work that you do. And so I speak about relationships every day, and I can connect absolutely everything to relationships. So I'm very excited about that, to go back into podcasting and creating a space that I own the content, and to have these conversations just like what you guys are doing. And just to give you an example of how I can connect everything to relationships. So let me tell you a quick story. So one day I was at the grocery store and I was buying bananas for my smoothies or whatever. And I don't know what was going on in the city, but like, who bought all the bananas? And there were just a few little scraggly bananas left there. I'm asking the people, hey, do you have, did a shipment come in? Are y'all going to restock the bananas? They're like, there's no more bananas. So I like my bananas a certain way, kind of firm, a little bit of green, but I was trying to pick the best bananas from what was available out of the worst. These were the bananas that were picked over. They're bruised, they're overripe. And depending on what you need, people making banana bread, these would be perfect for them, but that's not what I'm doing. And I thought, how many of us do this in our relationship? Instead of trying to pick from what's available, what we see right here, like these bananas, instead of, let me go to another store. Let me go to a farmer's market. Maybe I don't purchase bananas right now. What is the case? But how many of us do that in relationships? This isn't really what I want, but I'm almost 30. I need to get married. Let me look around. Okay, I'm dating this guy, or he's shown a little interest and I don't really like him. Again, linking everything to love and relationships. I'm simple bananas.
It is all about relationships, and especially relationship with self. I think when more people start to realize, let me get myself good, you open the doors for connection with others.
And you know what, Stephanie, I commend you for that. You expressed it so beautifully that you said, hey, a path that I did not know existed. Started your journey. Okay, it's very foggy. I can't see the path. I know it's there. Don't know. But now I see that it is just an endless, infinite path. And that is beautiful. And I think that once we realize that this life is all about discovering who we are, rediscovering, remembering who we are. And it's not a destination. It is an adventure. And I think that the ability to be gentle with ourselves, because again, life is on the job training in real time. And just what you said, Stephanie, and what I like to say at Love Grows is it's the relationship you have with yourself that determines and influences all of the relationships in your life.
I just thank you so much for taking time to share yourself with us. And we hope you sync up with us next time.